All right, welcome everybody. We're joined by Marina today for kind of this period where we're talking about our job fairs that we're doing and advice about getting a job so I thought it would be a good time to talk about the option of working independently and one of my friends came to mind who has some really interesting background herself, both working in her own businesses and also in government. So there's a lot to talk about. And also Juan is here with us. Hey, Juan.
Hey everyone, good to be back here again. Looking forward to this really insightful session by Marina.
Yeah. So usually Juan will have questions that I neglect to ask that are, I think he comes up with some good questions too. So, but he'll be lurking for most of the talk here. So anyway, Marina, welcome. Thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me. I don't know if you know this, Mike, but actually you gave me my first speaking engagement ever opportunity many years ago.
Really?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think Zach even videotaped it. So this is kind of a really fun full circle.
Oh, that's funny. Was that like one of the start pad?
Yep.
Start pad countdown. I called that series. That's right.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that you hadn't done it before, but it's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should just talk a little bit about your adult working history, and then we'll get in. I know you have some interesting stories from your even like young adult work history. But maybe tell a little bit about people, who you are and what you've been doing and now what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I was most recently the Chief Technology Officer for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs under President Obama. So I had that job for about 5 years. And a lot of my work was around redesigning VA's websites. We had 1,560 of them to one manageable place where veterans could manage, understand, and apply for all the benefits that they'd earned.
Wait, you're saying there were 1,500 distinct websites?
Yes.
Oh, wow. And were you the youngest person to hold this role?
Yeah, I was 27 when I went in. And perhaps relevant to this audience, I did not have a college degree or any particularly formal training, but I had a lot of years of building websites and different web applications with different businesses. And that ended up being the right experience to go into the VA and kind of understand what the art of the possible was when you have seemingly endless kind of wrong doors, so many websites, so many applications, so many things. And a real challenge in government at that time was the technologists were all the outside contractors, and there weren't necessarily a lot on the inside. A quick story, but there was one contract where somebody tried to charge $100,000 to change the source tag of an A code, and they made it all sound very complicated. All they were doing was changing one line of HTML to be a new URL, but they made it sound a whole multi-page proposal. And a really nice thing about having even like some basic technical prowess is like people thought I was a magician when I was able to negotiate away that $100,000 charge. But I suspect
I'll give you $20.
Yes, exactly. If that, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, you got to test it and stuff like that. So yeah.
That's fair. I'll give you $20 to change one line of HTML. Yeah.
Well, I think actually the cost per line of code, if you look at it, it actually is quite high. Like once you look at the whole life cycle costs of produced, products and stuff like that, $20 per line is actually not too bad, I think.
Sure. And the better code, can be definitely concise. A pitfall I see sometimes is when people try to charge code by the line, or they try to measure it, like the more lines of code you're producing every week. Yeah. And that really perverse incentive to, have really E.E. Cummings like comment section.
Yeah. Or just don't use a loop if you can write out every part of it one at a time.
Yeah. Nope. Use loops, guys. Use loops.
Yeah. All right. So CTO of the Veterans Administration, I think we would just be remiss to not take a little bit of a segue, say, how the heck did that happen?
I was minding my own business in Seattle with friends like you. I was doing a lot of business process reengineering, which is sort of a fancy way to say I was helping businesses use technology. It might be that they had a lot of paper accounting that they needed to move to an electronic form. It might have been that they had a very complicated back-end supply chain that they were kind of like Susie was filling out a form and passing it to Patsy and passing it to Bill. That's always kind of been my specialty, which is following how real people do their work and then thinking about how technology, whether it's a Salesforce app, it's an HTML page, it's, no code software, something like that, can help them get more efficient. So I was doing a lot of that. And then I saw a TechCrunch Disrupt video where the chief technology officer of the United States, Todd Park at the time, called out he wanted tech savvy entrepreneurs who wanted to come in and disrupt government. And I was pretty sure I was never going to get picked for it, but they said if you sent in your resume, you would get added to their mailing list. And so I did this sort of crazy for me thing. For $3, I bought a resume template on graphicriver.net, which makes you can just buy all sorts of nice Adobe Illustrator templates. And I wrote my resume and it said, I'm Marina in really big blue letters at the top. And it turns out that when they were filtering through all the resumes, like everybody to this day, and that was in 2012, still remembers mine, still remembers it as the blue resume, which I say to encourage you all, there's seemingly small ways that you can really stand out. And then I got a call Thursday if I could join the White House as one of their inaugural innovation fellows. And the criteria though was, this was a Thursday, I was in Seattle, that I had to move to DC by that following Tuesday. And that seemed just crazy enough.
Wow.
Willing to go for just 6 months. And then I ended up from there, a year to the day of becoming an innovation fellow, I became the chief technology officer of the VA and I stayed there for 5 years.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. So, and I hear that you got your VA job just because you took over for a meeting that someone else was supposed to go to?
Yes. So Todd, the chief technology officer of the United States at that point, was my boss. And the VA was always on the front page of the newspaper. But in this particular case, it was on the front page of the newspaper because there were offices that were literally buckling under the weight of unprocessed veterans' disability claims. And so President Obama said, we need to do something about this. We're going to start having a regular Tuesday meeting to work on it. And he invited the technology team, but Todd had a conflict on Tuesdays. So he asked me if I could go. I knew nothing about the VA. I didn't even know where the office was. But once I heard about the problem, I sort of fell in love with it because I saw so many ways that technology, big and small, could make a really significant difference. And so I worked on that at the White House for 6 months. And then they thought I did a good enough job that they hired me over to the VA to work on it full time.
But you kind of got the top job or something, didn't it? Or it's I think you've said it's ironically one of these titles that's like you don't have like it sounds like you've got a budget like hundreds of millions of dollars for your staff or something, but like that's not the case, is it?
No. When I got the job, I was told that my job responsibility was to redefine the art of the possible for how America honors and serves its veterans. So like, small potatoes.
Yeah.
But to do that, I had 0 staff and a $0 budget. And I actually gave this sort of legendary talk now at the Code for America Summit about how it took me 5 years to earn a dry erase board in government because I couldn't afford one. My office budget was $100 and a government dry erase board is $110. So I had to wait 5 years to afford my first dry erase board.
But you're kind of like I would kind of say you're kind of like the trim tab on the tail of a 747. Like you're like moving little movements here, and then this giant thing is like, definitely something with hundreds of millions of dollars of budget is being affected and moved around by what you're doing.
That is a very cool analogy that I'm going to definitely use going forward. I'm a trim tab. Okay. Yes, I was able to
no insult implied or anything.
No. I will take it. That is a great, yes. Cause I think people sometimes think that you need millions or billions of dollars, or you need a huge team to do something. And I'd actually say so I went to the VA and I have $0 and 0 people, right? So I'm not sure how to make a difference, but I can program. And so a few days into my first week at the job, nobody will really talk to me. Nobody will invite me to their meetings. They kind of don't know what to make of me or where I'm going to fit in or how I could help. And mostly like a new person I could be disruptive, I could cause problems. But this secretary popped her head in my office and she said, "Hey, Marina, have you seen Green Pack 52? And I was like, I don't even know what a green pack is. I certainly have not seen number 52 of it. And it turns out when members of Congress write letters to the VA, which happens a lot, they put them in a green folder, just a normal folder, and then there'd be a number on it. And this folder would get passed around the building, the 12-story huge building, so that everybody that wanted to kind of comment on the response would get a chance to. And this meant the secretaries were chasing these green folders all around the building and had no idea where they went. So I saw this and I was like, ooh, I could print a barcode on the folders. And I made this very basic Rails app. I called it Folder Finder. I made it in one afternoon. And all the secretaries, this being the VA, I will admit, we had a closet of unused barcode scanners. So we pulled out the barcode scanners, we handed it out to all the secretaries. And when they got a green pack, they would scan it in. And this changed my life, the VA, because the secretaries all thought I was a magician because I could print barcodes, which they thought was like very complicated tech. This was just a gem in my Rails app. It was like barcode maker, whatever. But it ended up solving a huge problem for some of the most important people at the agency, which is the secretarial pool.
Yeah, they control everyone's schedule and yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. And then because I had done that, a few months later, this was, everybody's probably familiar with healthcare.gov and that whole debacle. The next website that was supposed to launch in the Obama administration was at the VA after healthcare.gov. It was called the GI Bill Comparison Tool, and it was going to let veterans basically shop for which college benefits would give them the most money. This is something people don't really know, but depending on when you served, you might be eligible for 2, 3, or 4 different kinds of higher education benefits. And if you pick the wrong one, you're out like literally tens of thousands of dollars for college, which is a big difference. And so the VA was going to launch this tool. It cost $1 million. They load tested it before it launched, and it crashed at 8 visitors.
8 concurrent users. Wow.
And however, somebody in the secretarial pool was like, oh, Marina can make barcodes. I wonder if Marina could help with this. And they brought me in and
ironically, she can.
I was like, I can probably help with this. And we ended up moving it. I was told I had a $300 budget. They just spent $1 million on it, and all we have is $300 left. So I put it on GitHub Pages for free. And I had to swear to the White House on my firstborn child that GitHub Pages was not going to go down if it had more than 8 users. Spoiler alert, fine.
Yeah.
And so we put it up, and now the first launch after healthcare.gov at the VA ended up being a huge success. And that was some really amazing political capital that, for those of you, I mean, we're all in the same space. Like, that's not an objectively hard thing to do, is to put JavaScript calculator on a GitHub page.
Right. We are doing that. We do that. We have a lot of things on that. Yeah. It's a great tool, and it scales pretty well, actually.
I will swear on my first, I don't have a, if I did, I would swear on it all day.
Yeah.
Fine.
Well, that's amazing. Well, what have you done since you left the VA?
Since I left the VA, I do 2 things. I work a lot in foster care. So I've taken a lot of the experience of like bureaucracy hacking and making small changes that lead to big changes with multiple different states. So for example, taking their foster parent licensing application, which means grandmas have to go through too. It's not just general foster parents. It's anybody that's going to take in a foster child has to go through this really crazy, very hard paperwork process. So getting my arms around like, what are all the pieces of paper? How can we make it streamlined? How can we eliminate requirements if you don't actually have to go through it? So I work with 18 different states on simplifying that process, a lot of it through technology. And then I also have kind of an IT crisis firefighting firm with a few of my former government colleagues. And we will get called in when, like your mainframe is down and your mission critical service is not operating, and we can kind of fly in wherever you are and help restore you back to service. But I'll give you guys all a secret tip that usually the solution is not super complicated code and technology. I mean, usually it's stepping back, kind of understanding how the process is supposed to work. And often that will kind of reveal where the lug nut is in the wrong place.
You could turn it off and then turn it back on again.
That also actually really does work. I encourage that.
Well, some systems I would be very afraid to turn them off because they know they've been running for a long time.
Do not turn the air traffic control computer off. It might not come back.
Yes, exactly. Not sure. It hasn't been booted in a decade or something. So, yeah, well, that's interesting. So were you in the foster system yourself?
I was not.
Okay.
But done a lot of volunteering with foster kids. There's something called a CASA, which is a court-appointed special advocate, and I've been doing that for 15 years. And that kind of opened my eyes to all the different ways that kids can fall through the cracks. I mean, there are big ways you can fall through the cracks, but there's also small ways. Like if nobody fills out your school transfer paperwork, then your transcripts don't follow you. And if you have to move schools 3 times and your school transcripts never follow you the first time, I would kind of challenge any one of us on this call to graduate that year, and those are small things that an adult that just is confident filling out paperwork can really make a difference.
Oh, that's awesome. That's great. So someone asked on YouTube if you had government clearances, and since you worked with so much government information, did you need a clearance to do that?
Yes. So I don't have one today because I'm not in the government anymore, but most of the higher level technology jobs will have some level of a clearance.
Yeah. And they helped you get that when you got there, once you got
there,
I guess.
They cover that for you while you're there.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't maybe we should rewind the tape and I think, with I would say I would count your government experience as entrepreneurial as well. Like, even though it's working for government, like it sounds like you were really an agent of change and trying to figure out how to displace all the broken systems and stuff. But how did you get started? What was your first technology job or company?
It was when I was in 5th grade. So I was obsessed with the soap opera General Hospital. And when I was in 5th grade, boys and girls, it was still in the time of AOL channels. You couldn't go to like a World Wide Web website. You had to go to an AOL channel. And AOL was just starting to let you make like member pages, like if GeoCities or I guess Squarespace today, but without all the WYSIWYG tools. You'd have to just do raw HTML code. And I just loved this particular couple on the soap opera. And I started teaching myself HTML by making a website for them. And then I started learning Perl through a book that I bought at the bookstore with babysitting money, because I wanted to make like soap opera games like Hangman or a fan fiction generator or other. My site got very popular. And then I started getting contacted by the real actors and actresses if I could make their official fan pages. Now, nobody knew I was 12. I didn't think that was relevant for them to know. So I had a pretty booming business as a teenager, making websites. It started with for smaller celebrities. And then once somebody starts hearing you can make a web page, it became, like the neighbor, the friend's mom at school that needed it for her store, things like that. So by the time I was out of high school, I had a pretty solid freelance web design business.
Now, obviously, this was at a time where everything is so new. You kind of landed on a niche that was like yet to be like fully populated. And what do you think about like, are opportunities like that still exist today?
I think they absolutely do. And I think there's almost more niches to be found. So like maybe you're particularly passionate about a particular author or like something in nature or a neighborhood in Seattle. In fact, that might be a perfect one. Like there's only one Seattle neighborhood blog I can think of. How could you make the blog, get the WordPress up or whatever it may be, do some, and then you have a portfolio. And if it's something like a neighborhood blog, then you have a built-in audience of people that may want to hire you to do other things. And you can find your own niche, if it's front end, if it's back end, if you like doing blogs, if you want to be a WordPress troubleshooter. I mean, I think the areas for specializing, it may sound like a strange advice to start out specializing, but if you get really good at that specific thing, you may find like there's actually tons of business to be had from it.
Yeah. And how did you actually decide like how much to charge for this? And like, what was your process for like getting started, and charging for things? And what are your thoughts?
I don't know that I'd follow the same advice I did when I was 12, which was I was like $500. That sounds like a lot of money. And it was a lot of money to a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
I think it's online, you can, whatever it is that you may want to do, you could usually find some sort of a parallel person or website with hourly amounts. And then it also may make sense in your first thing or two, whatever it is. Maybe there's a nonprofit that you can just do it for free in exchange for a portfolio project. And that might be a good step to jump into then competitive rates after that. I've always preferred charging flat fees also. And that may mean, and when you're just starting out, you're going to hit that Rails bug and you're going to spend 8 extra hours on an application over maybe a more senior developer. But at the same time, it gave me clarity on what I was going to make at the end of the project. And then it gave the client that kind of clarity too. So I don't know if that's good advice or not, Mike, but that's something I've always done.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, you're taking some risk, but it's the client doesn't know how to estimate that. I think it's fair, that the person building it is the one who gives a guaranteed maximum price or something like that. I think that's
and if you start to specialize, it could be that you have that snippet of code that you get to reuse. So instead of charging, you spend 10 hours refining it one time, and then you can basically charge for it over and over in a flat fee arrangement.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with any of the freelancing sites now where people do, you can just kind of hang your shingle out on Fiverr or other kinds of things and just do smaller freelance tasks. I don't know what your opinion is of those, or if you have any knowledge of those things.
Yeah, I've heard of Elance, which I think was bought maybe by somebody else, and Fiverr and some others. I think that it totally makes sense, but you're going to need some way to kind of stand out from the crowd, especially if you're bidding on something that maybe has 30 or 40 other people. And I think that's where a niche can actually come in handy. If you specialize in something, you can be look, I have this really curated portfolio around neighborhood blogs or photography websites or elopement websites or whatever your area is. But also it doesn't hurt to try and dive in.
Yeah. It's pretty low cost to just take a image, just say, okay, I'm going to bid on a project and see what happens. And
absolutely. And then you can start seeing what others are charging and you should absolutely do some competitive research there, right? If you see a listing that you wish you could win, who wins it? What did they say? What was their portfolio like? What were they charging? So the extent you can do competitive research to that extent and then model yourself in that vein is probably low risk, high reward.
Yeah. I feel like some of those sites are a little bit of a race to the bottom. It's just whoever lowballs the thing the most, and then none of the creators are happy because they're all getting underpaid for the work.
I could totally see that as a risk, which is why recognizing we all need to eat, maybe doing your initial project rather than trying to lowball everybody else on a freelance site, maybe doing it with a nonprofit or someone that that needs it at X or Y, and then having that portfolio piece against which you can start charging a more reasonable rate, or at least have a more persuasive portfolio to negotiate higher rates.
Yeah. I think as a client, you don't really know it's the unknown quality too. It's I'm going to pay someone in the Philippines that I never, I don't know anything about them, and they're able to charge me, $200 for something that seems pretty complicated. It's hard to know what you're going to end up getting in the end. Yeah.
And learning a little bit about search engine optimization here probably couldn't hurt, because again, not to overuse the neighborhood blog angle, but if that became your specialty, you could spend 10 or $100 total on a month's worth of Google ads and see, who's searching for that. Are you looking on Twitter for people that are putting out a call for, hey, I need a blog, or I need an application, something like that may have a fewer applicants and get more specialized.
So after your kind of soap opera websites and things like that, how long did that business go on?
It went on for 10 years.
Wow.
Could have kept going, but for me, my area of weakness is graphic and visual design. I love the logic puzzle of the back end, and I love database schemas and architecting things, and I'm not particularly good at visual. And so I started walking away from front end web development and doing more Salesforce integration, database schema projects.
Okay. Did you ever hire anybody for that business? Were you working alone, or did you?
I had a partner. And I think she actually kept it going for a few more years, and then she ended up kind of going in a different direction as well. So definitely partnerships, especially where maybe you're more technical and you can pair up with someone that's more sales oriented. That can be a partnership, because I'm also not super great at sales. So having a partner in that can be really helpful.
Yeah. I was wondering why you didn't hire a designer or something if you thought you were not good on the graphics end of things.
I think at that time I wanted to work more on the back end stuff. You're absolutely right that if I wanted to keep the business, I absolutely could have hired a graphic designer and gone it. direction. But I think I was really enjoying the sort of logic puzzle. I don't know if this is in the scope of what you guys are learning, but platforms like a Salesforce or a Microsoft Dynamics where there's a no code layer, but then you learn like Salesforce has Apex, which is a flavor of Java, and you can really code it to like kingdom come.
Okay.
I really enjoyed that sort of puzzle because I just go into any arbitrary business and think through how I could make Salesforce out of the box plus code, like really optimize and maximize whatever they were doing for work. And I still to this day love doing that kind of work.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, we could probably use you at Reskill Americans too. Like we have a lot of manual processes that I think we're not quite, automated yet. So,
well, that sounds like some student projects, right? So.
It could be. Yeah. Yeah. I think that would be great. I would love to have some of our, soon to be graduated, participants, either help us out, and that would be really awesome.
Yeah. More experience you can get solving real problems, however big or small they are. I think to me that's key over like following an arbitrary tutorial that says like, I know Rails versus I can apply Rails to this green folder problem.
Right. Yeah, just I do hear that a lot, where people say like, oh, I've done so many of these just like YouTube tutorials, and they're very cookbooky and like you just follow a script kind of, and then but at the end of the thing, you didn't really think, what did I really learn, or do I really understand what I just did? So I like your suggestion of just like, tackling a real problem that and just trying to put it together yourself. You obviously have all the resources of the web to search for solutions to problems that you run into along the way.
Yeah, my first project I ever did when I was learning Rails, it was a task app, but customized to the way that my brain works. And it's been 12 years. I still use it every single day. So
now, is that a product? Is that a product also, or?
It's called Task Tackler. There's a wait list, but I haven't quite made it multi-user yet. That's one of my short-term goals.
Oh, okay. Hey, maybe one of our students wants to help you work on that.
Holler if that's the case. I said, please holler if anybody is interested.
Yeah. Well, maybe they could just do a little cut of revenue or something. I don't know. Not to negotiate for you on your behalf.
Oh,
but, yeah, that sounds like a fun because I did hear you did you were on a podcast with Stephen Levitt. Is that his name?
Yep.
Yeah. What was the name of it? Oh, people I
mostly in parentheses admire.
Mostly.
So. Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember looking at your website after that saying, oh, her methods or system sounds really interesting. And I had, I just have to go on a wait list. So I'm on your wait list. So.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, maybe I can let my earliest beta, but I mean, that really is a thing I'm going to be hiring a freelancer for, is a couple of, so in terms of, potential jobs, those are jobs that are out there too, as somebody that has their pet project, but needs that extra amount of help to get it to that next level.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can talk later and let me know what you need. I'll find some participants who are good at some the skills that you need. Cool. Well, what did you do after you had some other technology businesses along the way too? Is that right or not?
My business process reengineering, Salesforce integration was sort of one long consulting.
Okay.
My only ever job was being chief technology officer of the VA. Prior to that, I had a job in the sense of filling it, like getting a W-2 or getting a paycheck every other Friday. It's probably a weird first job to have, but
yeah, a C-level executive position as job number one, unless some nepotism is involved, I suppose, but
right,
that happens too.
Yeah.
So, all right. So your consulting business was like, I don't know. How did you like? So you obviously like working for yourself, and what would you say the pros and cons of like just being self-employed and why did you choose to stay in with that for so long?
I love the freedom. I mean, I'm a workaholic, which I guess could be a pro and a con. You can work as many hours and you can earn income consummate with that number of hours, right? Or it means you may have an 80-hour work week and like you're the only one on the hook for it. So that can definitely be a pro or a con. I always enjoyed the freedom of being able to kind of hustle up the money that I needed. Like if I was going to buy a car, I could just decide that I was going to work extra particularly hard for a few months, or like try to go after a couple of higher level projects. And I thought it was very weird getting a paycheck where I had no control over how much was in it or when it would arrive. Now, I think a lot of other people find comfort in paychecks. So I think you have to look into yourself of like which one of those it is, which isn't to say that you can't have a job and then freelance on the side. I also really liked it. I mean, my consulting business was very dynamic because I got to kind of go in directions that I was interested in. I didn't set out to become like a Salesforce integrator, for example, but I got to know the platform more because when I was building websites for my companies that I was working with, they were increasingly using it as a platform, and I got to kind of dabble in it. And once a customer gets to know you and that you're good at X, whatever X is, they're probably a lot more inclined to let you do Y, even if you maybe aren't as good at Y. So looking for those sorts of growth opportunities are pretty cool as well. A downside is it's hard to get mentorship or feedback on when you're freelancing because you're working for yourself, which isn't to say that you can't get feedback from clients or that the market isn't a form of feedback. And in terms of like your growth as a leader, I think as a freelancer, you could, if that's a thing that you want to work on, certainly build teams or help coordinate teams to various extents. That is not my favorite thing to do. I can do it, but it's not something that I necessarily seek out. And I like that about freelancing as well, that at the end of the day, like, it's possible that I could take on a project that I just get to work on by myself for a little while. If you're a super expert, it may not be, I don't want to say it may not be the right fit. You just may need to freelance differently, you know, in a way that you're at a WeWork or you're with others on a team or something like that.
Oh, you're saying if you're what? If you're
an extrovert, if you like really
extrovert. Oh, I see. You really like to be around people and yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah. You get to meet with clients and, you know, like that, you know, usually that regular check-ins and stuff like that. But yeah. But if you like spending time in front of the computer solving problems and things like that, you know, it's like you don't have to take any meetings other than with a client, I guess.
Yep. But there's all different freelance arrangements, right? It could be somebody wants to hire you to build an application and they meet with you for a couple of hours to go over the requirements, and then you go off and complete it however works for you. You could also freelance in that you're like showing up to work at Microsoft every day for 3 or 6 months on a freelance gig. So freelancing has a lot of flexibility, and you don't have to pick one or the other. You could do one and then the other and go back and forth.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to think what we've kind of gone through a lot of my questions. You know, one of the things you said you were, you know, what kind of struck me a little bit is that you were not liking so much like the directing other people or like working in teams. It seems like your government job is all about working with teams and not so much of the individual contribution stuff.
That is absolutely correct. Although when I started at the VA, you know, again, I had no team members directly under me. And ironically, at that time, I fought really hard to try to get some because it's very hard to get a lot done in a large organization, literally on your own. But there's something nice about being an independent operator sometimes. And I still kind of do this in foster care where like when you're just one person who's kind of bopping around and looking at problems and finding little levers to pull, the bureaucracy's antibodies may not notice you to the same effect as they would if a team of, you know, 150 people come in and start auditing or asking questions, and the bureaucracy kind of gets a little bit scared. So I think there's some benefits to being an independent operator. I certainly learned a lot. I mean, by the time I left the VA, I had a team of 75 people, which is perhaps not objectively large, but for me was
working for you. You said you had. Yeah. So you had to manage those people and
learn. And I was very blessed that most of my hires were people that were very willing to give me feedback about what I was not doing well or could do better. And I tried really, really hard to be someone that could get feedback. Like I thought my primary goal would be to be a safe place that if you told me I was not doing something well, that I wouldn't like yell at you or fire you or make you feel uncomfortable. And I would say, you know, thank you, even though it never feels good to get feedback like that. Try to really make sure that they could give it to me and then try to work on whatever it was. For example, I had a tendency to overcommit my team because I was so used to overcommitting myself as a freelancer that I would often overcommit our project team, and they did not appreciate me signing them up for 80-hour weeks. So
okay, yeah. So right now, so doing the foster care work that you're doing now, are you doing that still as like a solo person? You part of an organization, or like, I know that you're a member of some organizations, I thought that were related
I
to
sit
that.
at a foundation. It's called New America. And
Okay.
I'm on a team called the New Practice Lab, but uh, I am the child welfare person, if that makes sense. Like there's also a child tax credit person and there's a unemployment person. And so I primarily work on my own, but I am very lucky that if I need teammates, frankly, I hire freelancers to help me in different capacities. Freelance writers to help write case studies from some of the work that I've done. Had definitely hired a freelancer to make our website for our child welfare work. So it's actually kind of a nice augmentation, but I don't have any full-time team members.
Okay. So are you getting a salary and a budget from them or to do work, or how is that working?
I have a grant. So I
Okay.
fundraise, and then the grant, is in exchange for doing a certain amount of objectives, which includes me, but also that whatever freelancers I might need.
Okay. Were you involved in helping get that grant?
Yes. You have to do your own. I had
Applied
to do
for?
so
What was that?
I had to do my own fundraising. And there are luckily some really great organizations out there like Schmidt Futures and Rakes in Seattle that helped fund the work.
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So you basically kind of described the impact you could have and what you wanted to do, and then wrote some grant proposals for that, and then had to pitch it to funders and get your position paid for.
Yeah, it ends up being very similar, frankly, to like bidding on freelance contracts, because you're writing out what you're going to do and what time frame, how much it's going to cost. That's a lot of. So it's freelancing is perhaps good nonprofit grant writing experience too.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, so there's so many ways to just kind of like fund, everyone needs to make a living, and but you obviously want to do good as well. Like I think your primary motivation is changing the world and making it a better place, as opposed to how much money you're making at the moment. But yeah, you do need to get that support. And it's interesting. Like it's not a one size fits all situation, I guess. There's a lot of creativity that goes into that.
Yeah, and you can do good from all sorts of places. I mean, one huge one is if any of you were to freelance or take a short-term consulting gig with like a government contractor, the government doesn't hire freelancers directly, but they hire many of them indirectly through these consulting firms. And that's where you can be the difference between like if somebody can understand their Social Security benefits or not, if you're the one that's there. So, there's plenty of ways that you can earn a salary that meets more than meets your needs, and also really do good for the world.
Well, I think one of the things that you do so well is, and this is necessarily like directly on our topic, but yeah, it seems like you have a special ability to maybe like cut through a lot of complexity and noise and understand like the underlying problem, and like how to simplify the underlying problem and find solutions that are not as complex as they've gotten to be in whatever organization that they're in. Do you have any like secrets to that, or like how do you do that?
Yeah, my secret is that whatever problem you're trying to solve, you need to go to where the actual problem is, and you need to follow it from start to finish. Whether that's a disability claim, I helped California with their unemployment claim backlog last year, and I literally got chased by wild turkeys going from building to building, following real claims from the mail room to when the mail got opened to when it got processed at step 1, step 2, step 3. And when you start doing that, if you have a programmer's mindset of it's kind of like, how am I going to code this? What would the loop be? What would the most efficient way to do that? I think you really start unlocking a lot of possibilities. The bigger the problem, the more likely it is that the left hand not only isn't talking to the right hand, but like has absolutely no idea that the right hand exists. A quick example from the VA that I found was when a veteran applies for a disability claim, you have to go to a hospital and get an exam, a physical medical exam. That doctor would write literally like an 8-page medical essay trying to like really take care of you. They really cared. They wanted everything documented, having no idea that the next step in the process was that a claims specialist who was not a medical person at all had 1, 2, or 3 extremely specific questions to answer. That's it. Like, what's your range of motion in your elbow? No narrative, just a number. That's all they could put in the box. So they basically disregarded this 8-page essay, not because they didn't care about it, but because it wasn't their job to do. And then that's how the decision was made. And once we put all those people in a room and had them demonstrate to one another what their process was, the doctors very quickly stopped writing the 8-page essay. And that meant they could serve many, many times more veterans. And ultimately what we did was we gave that calculator question to the doctor, who's way more qualified to fill it out right when they're in front of them. And that starts shaving months off a disability processing claim. And there was no secret sauce there except following from end to end, but they were done in 2 different agencies. So it was never anybody's job to see from start to finish the whole process. So I think that's been my secret sauce everywhere. And you all can do that wherever, if it's an auto dealership, if it's a store, if it's a large government agency, like follow the process from start to finish.
So you just like look at every part of it, I guess someone has to identify a problem at some point, like, or you say like the floors are collapsing from the weight of disability claims. And, but then you just say, okay, I'm going to go look at each step of that process. And even that sounds so daunting though. Like, it sounds like they could be, to me, that would be, I would think I would curl up in a ball and go like, no, how do I do that? Yeah, I don't know.
It can definitely be daunting. But also if you don't have to show up and look at the problem and have the solutions up front. You can just say you're going to go look, you're just going to go shadow a claim. You're just going to shadow the accounting office. And then what comes out of that may be less daunting, Mike, once you're like, oh, wait a minute, if they just used Excel, for example, to keep that list instead of like this piece of paper that is clearly like passed around from every office and gets lost, you making an Excel spreadsheet, I think you probably feel pretty comfortable with.
Yeah.
Moving a thing I've done for 2 states is move their Excel spreadsheet of important information off the Office drive, which meant everybody was saving over one another's, move it onto SharePoint, which really only meant like going into SharePoint, clicking opening the spreadsheet, and then showing everybody the new location to access it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how do like you've made it like a career of fixing business processes? How do you think they get so messed up to begin with? Like, why does the world need people like you to kind of clean up these messes that it seem to be so incredible?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot. And I think a lot of times people think like the VA, right? It's very broken. It's very Byzantine. And they think there's like some evil guy on the 12th floor who's maliciously trying to keep veterans from getting their benefits. And I often tell them like, that'd be great if there was an evil guy on the 12th floor, because you just like stick a chair under his doorknob, lock him in there, and then you like fix it all while he's stuck. I think the bigger problem is often that things aren't designed at all. Whether it's in business or government, you tack on an extra step or something changes at step 2. Nobody ever zooms out and says like, oh, maybe we should change, step 7. A quick example here in my foster care work, I was in a child welfare agency and I was following them processing a grandmother's background check. And when the child welfare worker was filling out, she's I don't even know if your audience is old enough necessarily to remember this, but carbon copy paper.
We have a freak age range in our group.
Through the pain, yes. She's filling out a DMV record request on this carbon paper. And I'm like, tell me about this step. And she was like, the people at the DMV live in the 19th century. I can't believe they're making me fill out this carbon form. It's so stupid. And because I was just a little bit bold, went to the DMV then. And I was like, show me how you process background checks for the child welfare agency. And the woman pulls up an electronic system and she's like, oh, they come in through email. And then I do it right here and poof. And I was like, I saw somebody fill out a carbon copy paper. And she was like, oh, you were at child welfare. They're in the 19th century. Why don't they use our email system? And that was one of those pretty easy things where I was like, hey guys, I am going to solve a lot of your problems.
Everybody's in the 20th century now. It's like,
yeah, everybody's in the 20th century. And it was nobody's fault. It's just that when the DMV moved systems, there was no way to communicate that back up the line. And generally an employee, like if your job is to do the data entry from the forms you're getting in, you're not empowered to go over to the child welfare office. Like it's just, you have a job that you've been given, but you as problem solvers can feel very empowered to move around in different ways.
It makes me realize that those, sometimes you hear about like companies that have a suggestion box from employees, or especially if they pay bonuses for suggestions. Like there's so many opportunities for employees to go like, my job is stupid. Like I need to not do the part of this part of my job because it's stupid. And like they suggest it, you know, and then someone can go through there and go like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that we were doing that.
Yeah. If you've seen Office Space, there's the Bobs who come and they ask like, what exactly do you do here?
Yeah.
Which is not my recommended approach, because people, they may take pride in their job, right? Like this is also a thing I really learned, frankly, by screwing it up the first few times. Is like, if I come into an agency and all of their applications are hosted on servers physically in the office and their SLA is at 80% and it's run by a team of people that have been there all together for 20 plus years, the thing to do is not to say, why don't we just put this in the cloud, guys?
Yeah.
Because you're taking a group of experts that have spent 20 years working together and are quite expert at their domain. And you're basically saying like, I want you to start doing your job in Portuguese tomorrow. And I want you to be like a super beginner. And that's a scary proposition for people.
Yeah.
And there are different ways to handle it. Not everybody will be approach the same. Some people will want to learn about the cloud and won't mind. They'll kind of enjoy a new learning curve. Some other people will want an early retirement benefit. Some other people will frankly like let them keep watching their servers while maybe you do another server over in the cloud. And you know, it's a mistake I've made many times and I keep trying not to make, is to go in and kind of reflect my lens of what the correct answer is upon people who have to live with the decisions of my outside consulting advice.
Yeah, I think that a lot of companies, a lot of employees are very nervous when someone comes in from a consulting agency or an efficiency expert,
right?
All of a sudden comes in and it's like, what is going to happen? You know, I think the stereotype is like, they don't really understand the problem. They're going to screw everything up.
Yeah.
Or I might be losing my job, you know, the job security, if they change everything.
Yeah. I like when I'm shadowing people, I like to ask them the question, tell me a mystery. And people will often have an answer. They're like, oh, the mystery is like, I don't know where this comes from, or I don't know where this goes, or I don't know why we ask them this thing on page 7, but I've always wondered it. And if you can go solve the mystery, it often makes them really open up to you in new ways, but it's a safe space because you're not there saying like, tell me all the parts of your job I can automate away with a macro. You're saying, just tell me a mystery, like something that you've wondered for a while about your job. And you're often empowered, especially as a freelancer or as a consultant, to be more of like the queen on the chessboard. You can go forward, backward, around, and they may be more limited in the moves they can make.
Yeah. Well, someone else asked. Oh, go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, we have a question on YouTube. Somebody was asking, like, you know, what you do in your kind of like business and freelancing, what that would be in a job function. Would that be like a DevOps or operations?
I think the closest to what I do is probably be a product manager, because I do a lot of kind of zooming out and kind of understanding how different systems work. So I think I'd probably be closest to a product manager.
Yeah. I mean, I think of DevOps as someone who's like takes a system, you know, usually a bunch of servers and things that have to work together, communicate, be reliable, not lose data, and figure out how to operate those and troubleshoot, you know, when things go wrong, when communication's broken. And so maybe it's like you sound like you do a lot of like human mediated processes, kind of efficiency, making those more efficient.
I'm kind of an SRE, but often more of like the systems are more human than hardware sometimes.
Yeah. SRE. I don't know if that
solutions.
Now,
systems engineer, which is kind of a it's a term that was born at Google for helping keep Google search up. Yeah. So it was kind of like troubleshooters that could go from end to end. I think there's a Bible of SREs that O'Reilly published that has a
I think there is. Yeah. I one of my friends is an SRE at Google, and he's one of the most amazing people. But their SREs have kind of like godlike status within Google. You know,
For sure.
they're like, they've got this superpower of like really being, you know, in touch with how everything is working, as opposed to software developers that are kind of usually working in their own little domain, and you know, and they don't understand how the big picture necessarily works.
And that's another nice thing of freelancing is you can start, you know, if instead of being at one place doing one thing, if you have in that same period of time experience in 7 different places, you're going to start being able to pattern match. Oh, I saw a problem like this here. I saw a solution like that here and it didn't work. I saw a solution like that here and it did work. And that kind of pattern matching is where you can really start raising your prices, frankly, as consultants, because it's very hard to replicate pattern matching. And even a super skilled, and this happens quite a bit in my consulting work, someone can be absolutely objectively super skilled at their particular job, but because they've been there for 10 years or they have a particular scope, they don't know about that other thing that I happen to know about because I've been at 85 other places in the last 10 years. And so that can be a real benefit where I can help share that knowledge or insight or a different idea that is not, I'm replacing you with a macro. It's just, hey, here's an additional thing that you might want to check out, or here's maybe why you don't want to use Kubernetes on this problem or something like that.
Okay.
So I wanted to ask some other like freelancing and entrepreneurship questions, because I know like it's really challenging because like typically you don't get like a roadmap, you know, the way you get in a job where they'll tell you what your roles are. And you kind of like have to multitask between being the person who's actually doing the actual work and selling and prospecting and doing all of the extra things. So I think maybe the first question would be, how do you even like not get overwhelmed by just the amount of things that you have to do in order to be successful?
Well, I'm a big fan of making a list. I'm a very type A personality, but also there's not to be meta, but you can always outsource some of your other tasks, like maybe to an app or to a person, accounting, timekeeping, selling, perhaps. Like, again, maybe you can find a partner, maybe there's an online marketplace, maybe there's some sort of an affiliate arrangement where someone can get a cut of your income, but you don't have to deal with the trudging up the business. Referral fees from your current customers who may refer you to someone else and then maybe get either more of your time or literally money or something like that. So looking at ways, the more experience you get, the more you're going to learn the things that you are good at and that you enjoy, the things you are good at and that you do not enjoy, and the things that you are not good at. And then you can make different decisions from there. If you're not good at it, is it something you're going to get better at, or is it something that you can outsource? And it's certainly easier to outsource things the more money that you have and the more experience that you have, but it doesn't mean you can't do it earlier on, even if maybe there's like a barter type of situation. Maybe your accountant needs a website and you trade.
That's amazing. My next question is, so I understand like there's almost like many different ways to get started in freelancing, but you know, a challenge could be there are certain niches that, you know, if you work with entrepreneurs in that space, they typically are cash flow positive and you're likely to make money faster versus if you go work with people who are sometimes maybe side hustlers or entrepreneurs. So how do you kind of like decide, you know, on finding the right niches for you where you can start to pick up some earnings early on and then build on that?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I would say that wherever you can get your experience early on, the better. If that's a hustler, if that's a bigger company, if that's a nonprofit, because having your portfolio is what's going to be key to your jumping off points. But you also want to think about like what the networking effects are. Because to your point, you know, if my first few gigs are in a circle or a niche that's not going to help get any referrals or help me get the word out, or maybe even I don't know that I'd recommend a portfolio project that's top secret, for example, because that's hard to put on your resume. So thinking about like how it might be a jumping stone, but mostly I would just focus on like starting somewhere and not worrying too much about where that somewhere is, would be my main advice. I started a lot in car dealerships. I don't, to this day, really know much about cars, but the experience was incredible and very, very valuable.
Well, we're coming toward the end. Do you have any more questions?
Oh, yes, I did.
You got a bunch.
You mentioned, I think your initial work was working on like personal websites and small business websites, but you kind of made the transition towards solving business problems, which meant that, because again, I imagine it's easier to sell to individuals versus businesses. So What would you say like was the difference in experience working on both of those ends, and what are some of the tips for people who kind of like want to go into the businesses, is having connections inside helpful, or how can you hack it essentially?
Yeah. I actually don't know that I thought individuals were easier than businesses. I think with a business, you can make more of an ROI argument. You could even do a deal where you're like, hey, I'll help automate your accounting system, or I'll help automate this paper-based process. If it doesn't work, if you don't use it in 30 days, you don't have to pay me. And a business could be very intrigued by that kind of an ROI perspective. Also with a business, they may not know exactly what they need. And I think this is where freelancers can really have strength. They are probably, maybe, but they may not be posting that they need a Ruby on Rails app that does this, this, and this, or that they need an Angular app that does this, this, and this. They just have a problem. And they might not know what that problem is. So the extent to which you can leverage whoever you know in your life now and follow them and just learn more about problems in different industries. It could literally be following a plumber, which is something that one of my colleagues did. They followed a bunch of plumbers and just learned what some of their challenges were with keeping track of jobs and being able to fit in emergency gigs, which pay more money is my understanding, but are kind of hard to schedule in. And they solved some of those problems by building them a case management app for plumbers that then they ended up building out for a number of other areas as well. So like find a problem that someone might not even know you could solve. I think those are the most fun, rather than expecting that everybody else knows what their problem is and what their solution is. Like that's why they're paying you, is to find the solution and maybe even to pitch the solution.
So was that plumber app something that they could scale? Could like make as a service, or that?
Yes,
they would just...
and that's explicitly what they're doing. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So then they could just sign up a large number of people to subscribe to this. That's cool.
Correct. Yeah. And that's not a bad idea at all in the freelancer world. You may solve a problem for one customer and then discover, to this day, actually, people feel free to take this idea, anybody, because I'm not going to do it. My folder finder app at the VA, people ask me on the regular, hey, do you have the source code for that? Because we'd really like to use that at our agency or department or whatever. You can find it on my GitHub if anybody wants to take it. But, there's seemingly small things like that. I think I could probably charge $5 a month for that and help a lot of people solve a seemingly small problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
To your point, I think even MailChimp that got bought yesterday kind of like started almost like a side project in an agency and bootstrapped it all the way to selling at $2 billion.
And MailChimp is so hard now that I think I need a consultant to help me figure out how to use MailChimp sometimes. So then it's just the whole circle continues.
My final question would be like the road and path for like freelancers can be a little challenging at times, and there's a lot of anxiety and things like that. Like, how do you deal with that?
The anxiety is definitely real, and it may be what detracts you from being a freelancer. In terms of, I know I have some friends who just absolutely want W-2 jobs, and that's their security. For me, I always looked at that as the flip of, if I'm in control and I can hustle or whatever it may be, then that's less anxiety inducing for me. And I know that everybody's going to have a different take on this, but there are ways to risk mitigate it. Like maybe don't start your freelance career when you just moved to a new place and you have a 10-day-old baby and you have no money in the bank. Like maybe that's a time that you take something that's a little more stable or predictable, but also like maybe that's exactly the right time to really dive in and try to make it work. The early time of freelancing may mean some long hours. It may mean building some of your experience on a project that's not your perfect ideal one. But I think the earlier you can dive in somewhere, that would be my best advice. You never know where it'll lead. You could end up as a CTO of a government agency. Warning.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. All right, well, we've come to the end of our hour, and I don't know. I think we've circled quite a few interesting topics. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I think your career has been so fascinating and really interesting. And I think it I don't know if there's any like last advice for people that you would have for someone to decide if they want to do something independent or not.
Yeah, I think try it. I don't mean to be flippant, but that really is my advice. That try it. It may not be perfect. You may. What will probably happen is it will take you in some sort of unexpected path. And so I just really encourage saying, Bob Parsons, who's the CEO of GoDaddy, had this quote that I live a lot of my life by. He was trying to decide whether to start GoDaddy, and he was nervous and anxious about it and didn't want to do it. And his dad said, well, if you do it, can they eat you? And he said, well, no. And he said, well, what do you have to lose then? And I think about that a lot when I'm anxious about something, when I'm scared to do something. Like, can they eat me? Hopefully the answer is no.
Yeah.
Maybe you're doing a wildlife safari, shadow, but try it.
Yeah. And it is so, it's so low risk. I think just trying some things, it might take a while to be successful, I would say. And that's probably maybe what people are worried about. Oh, I'm afraid I won't succeed. But, if you don't do it, you're not going to succeed at all. So, or you'll have to do something else. But, well, great. All right, Marina, thank you so much for talking with us today. I think it was really interesting.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.
All right. Okay. See you, Juwan.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, everyone. And thanks for joining us today. Okay. Bye.